this brain performance seminar, I'm going to talk to you about resilience. Resilience is an essential core competency or capacity that you and I as humans need. We need this in work and life. It is the buffer that provides this reserve to ensure that we do not implode when adverse events come our way, and they will. And this is what's going to happen in work and life, and especially as high-performance teams, we need to understand how the drivers of the brain-body system for high performance work into resilience and affect it positively if you look after it carefully as leaders and as members of the team. Now, this is what you can expect to learn from this session. There's a specific way that we define or describe resilience, and I'll take you through that in the next slide. But you also have to really understand that everything affects everything. And the whole brain-body system works as a system. Even our best attempts to try to describe a system in terms of its small parts, its fractal elements, is still reductionistic. So we reduce the system to smaller parts, and then we try to make sense of the system by explaining the parts and putting it together. We are not really good at that. So at least we know that everything affects everything, and in this sense, it's worthwhile to understand that the innovative prefrontal cortex contributes to resilience, health, and wellness. So this wonderfully sophisticated prefrontal part of our brain has an effect on resilience, health, wellness, because it's part of the brain-body system. And so everything affects everything. There is, however, a weightedness around certain drivers of the brain-body system, and I'm going to highlight that for you during this session. The next important highlight is to understand that resilience requires a working knowledge of the stress response. So you need to understand what happens in the brain when an adverse event occurs and how this is regulated, and to what extent this is good for us and to what extent it is bad for us. Now, in the previous brain performance seminar, we dealt with chronic stress quite in depth, I would say, and I think if you just sit back for a moment, think about it, chronic stress is something which ensues when an adverse event is not removed. So the stressor is still present. And the resilience determines to what extent we can overcome this adverse event and not implode and effectively decompensate. So that's an important theme to understand and to learn in this session, and I'll take you through that again. Social safety is a fundamental, important driver, if you may, for resilience. It is the highly weighted driver to ensure that you and I remain resilient. And the flip side of the coin is that a lack of social safety greatly contributes to reduce our resilience. And a lack of social safety cannot really be made up by a number of other drivers, if you may, to the extent that it completely overrides it. It leaves a big gap. We need to be socially safe, and we have to have a sense of social safety. Wellness rhythms of exercise, movement, nutrition, sleep, wake. So these are the foundational drivers, and sonics in the mind once again also form a foundational platform for this resilience buffer. And I will demonstrate this also in this session. And then furthermore, at the end of all, we really need to just grasp and embody this idea that resilience can be enhanced and that resilience can be reduced. It is a dynamic characteristic of our brain-body system. It is good news and it is bad news. The good news, and the cup is all full, is that if you really look after the brain-body system properly with you, yourself and your team, your family, you build resiliency. And resilience really enables you, remember, to stay on top of things, to compensate, to perform at your best. and to thrive in life and effectively in the workplace and in your teams. This is how we define resilience from a NeuroZone perspective. It is a capacity. It's the capacity of the brain-body system to prevent implosion in the presence of severe and or prolonged stress. It forms this buffer. Resilience also determines that we bounce back after the stressor has subsided. But we don't only bounce back to the original state that we were in before the adverse event or the stressor occurred. We are human beings, we are not inert objects. So we learn from these events, and something called allostasis is a process through which we grow through these stressful events to prepare the brain-body system for new and even unrelated stressors. One of the things that really strikes me about life is that as we get older, we lose more. And because we lose more, we should probably be more resilient and capable to handle loss and to overcome the sense of loss and to be able to continue to function within a brain-body system that is optimized within these new parameters and optimized for performance. So resilience in this sense is a dynamic process. It can be reduced, it can be enhanced, but we also grow through resilience to even become more resilient as we journey through life. Let's revise the concept of prefrontal regulation. This is the state that you want to be in. Your brain-body system is optimized, your prefrontal cortex is switched on, and it is regulating the system, and it enables you to recruit the cortical capacities in your brain at the right levels, at the right time, and ensure that you make the most innovative decisions about what to do next and how to solve the problems and fashion novel products. If you have chronic stress and your system starts to implode, the amygdalas regulate the system. And it means that we don't have a great scaled form of assignment of brain function to every challenge that comes our way. And this is what you really want to be. You want to be in prefrontal regulation. You want to ensure that you have this capability so that the brain-body system looks after you properly and performs at its best when it is needed. And if you think about resilience, you have to consider this primordial, what we call a gateway triad: the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and also the hippocampus. You can see the hypothalamus marked here in this 3D model, and please, you can also go back and have a look at your 3D model, and you'll see a number of things written about the hypothalamus. You can play around with it and just get a good feel for where it is situated in the brain and how central it is to everything downstream and upstream. The amygdalas, these eyes of the monster, if you may, these little pink almonds, hugely important, the seed of emotional origins, the seed of emotion, the place from where the brain assigns a value to incoming cues to ensure that we avoid threats, that we maximize rewards. And then the blue, beautiful blue structure is called the hippocampus or the hippocampi. And remember, we learn with the hippocampus. From the hippocampus, most likely evolved the so-called outside part of the brain, the problem-solving brain, the so-called dorsolateral pathways, the pathways going to the prefrontal cortex, to the outside of the and upper part of the prefrontal cortex. And you really want the prefrontal cortex to be the regulator. You want the amygdalas to be almost submitted to the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdalas must really do the right things for us when we need it most, which is under serious stress situations or where we have to make snap decisions. The amygdala can override the process, which is fine, but it should not override the process when you sit in a boardroom and you have to make a decision where you feel threatened. The amygdalas should not drive these snapshot type of decisions that lead to the wrong outcomes. So the amygdalas need to be attenuated, and the hypothalamus needs to only receive the information from the amygdalas when there's a real threat to respond through a stress response. The hippocampuses, these blue structures, need to be nourished, and they need to be growing beautiful networks, neural networks, to ensure that you build new memory, and that these new memories are shipped out into the long-term memory sites where they can be used for innovative and creative solutions and high performance within teams and as an individual, because that's always one thing, right? So, if you think about resilience, you really have to look after these structures first and foremost. Remember that the hypothalamus is where bonding takes place, and the amygdalas and these pathways really ensure that we are socially safe. And I'm going to really focus on these two components now in the next few slides.
At this point, I want you to take a break. We will continue in the next part at exactly the same point, and we will continue to build the seminar, and so the three parts will stand together as a continuum of effectively one topic being dealt with efficiently. But take a break now, just relax, move around, and just come back to the next part when you are ready and replenished again. Don't forget, you are a biological system, and you need these periods of rest in between.